Well, welcome back again this week. Last week I wasn't really able to develop what I was talking about relative to Cuba and Obama. Again, I recommend this book. It's not a narrative, it's just a compilation of a number of articles by Trevor Loudon about Obama, and the book is titled Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. I imagine you get it through Amazon and other sources. But it's a good text to have relative to documenting a lot of things that you may be caught saying that somebody will challenge relative to what we talk about on the air in these various videos and put in the New American and that are on other websites as well. But the problem of Obama recognizing Cuba is a lot more serious than people think. Now, I mentioned that there are a lot of libertarians that want to open up Cuba again and that sort of thing. I understand. I never read them, but I understand. I got a lot of comments in opposition to my opposition of recognizing Cuba, that we've got to go down and help these people, etc. One of the reasons that we broke off relationships with Cuba was because Cuba was importing terrorism into the United States through their intelligence bureau. And for those of you who are aware of what's going on, Obama launched his political career in the apartment of Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, who were one of the founders of Venceremos Brigade, out of the Students for Democratic Society. Now, the Venceremos Brigade was founded jointly by the SDS and the Cuban Communist government. And a lot of these people that founded the Venceremos Brigade went into the weather underground and became full-scale terrorists. Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, all you have to do is go online and look at their terrorist background. And this was the apartment in which Obama launched his political career. He has also appointed people into his cabinet over and over and over again who have been admitted communists, individuals with strong ties to the Cuban government and the Venceremos Brigade, and also the Institute for Policy Studies, which Larry McDonald, the former chairman of the John Birch Society, a United States congressman from Georgia, and a medical doctor, formed an organization called Western Goals, and he was able to expose the fact that the Institute for Policy Studies, operating in Washington, D.C., had heavy Cuban intelligence infiltration in it. And people like Panetta, who once was a cabinet officer in Obama's administration, had ties to the IPS and that sort of thing. But over and over again, we saw people who had ties to this Cuban government, to the communist terrorist organizations out of Cuba, and part of the administration of Obama. And so it's almost as if Obama is paying them all back by opening up Cuba. As a result, Cuba will start to import again terrorism into the United States. The various things that have been going on recently with illegal immigration, the campaign in the streets against the police, and that sort of thing, are setting the stage for the same kind of thing that they did back in the 60s and 70s. Another thing that they did back then, if you remember, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis under John Kennedy, where we supposedly forced them to take missiles out of Cuba, back to Russia, who put them in there to begin with, because Cuba was a Russian satellite. Today, we know there are Russian missiles back in Cuba because Putin has told us so by 2012. Now, you didn't read that anywhere in your popular press, but he gave a speech saying that they had, and that they're forming more and more military alliances and capabilities in Cuba as they did during the height of the Cold War. This was 2 years ago, actually closer to 3 now. So that's the sort of thing that's going on. Cuba runs Venezuela through its intelligence services. So you see these various things coming up that were a problem in the 60s and 70s, part of the Cold War, part of the reason why we cut and severed relationships with Cuba, because we didn't want that stuff imported into the United States anymore. It will happen again unless we do something about it. And, oh, by the way, now that missiles are back into Cuba, Obama administration has cut some of the early warning system along the southern tier of the United States. Just saying. At any rate, so that's the sort of thing that's going on in regard to Cuba. The other thing is that what we see is a growing alliance worldwide that we've talked about, particularly the BRICS organization, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But another one that exists that most people are unaware of is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is ostensibly an economic alliance, but it is also a military alliance to be a counterbalance to the West, so to speak. They include Russia, China, the four stands, the Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, you're going to have to bear with me on this one, Kyrgyzstan. These are all part of the USSR originally, and were Soviet republics. Then also, India has joined now, Pakistan has joined, Iran has joined, and the remainder of the BRICS organization, Brazil and South Africa, have reached observer status. So these are the kinds of things that are going on that you're not reading about and understanding the geopolitical problems involved in these things. It's always sold to us as helping the poor or helping the downtrodden or changing the regime and that sort of business, when in fact what they're doing is creating the situation for a future war. Now they're going to try and tell us that these free trade agreements, so-called, but actually they're unions, are going to be done in such a way that if we just get in touch with each other, if we just integrate our economies and that sort of thing, nobody will be able to afford a war because we're so interdependent. Well, that's not what's happening outside of the realm of these treaty negotiations and that sort of thing, and in your mainline articles in your media. What's happening is that the world is being divided. And it's being divided in such a way that it looks as though what will be the primary situation is what Orwell forecast, and many others clear back to 1850, and that is the ascendancy of the United States, Russia, and China to become the world powers until ultimately they run the world, and as Orwell has said, part of that will be wars against one another to create draconian situations within the various countries, within our country particularly, in the name of winning the war, in the name of terrorism. And that's what's going on with police brutality and all the rest of it, is that that is the mantra to radicalize the left and certain sectors of the right so that we have a them and us situation in our communities, and the police will be the bad guys or the good guys, depending on what side of the fence you're on, and the demonstrators will be bad guys no matter what side of the fence you're on. But at any rate, it's all being set up. It's all being orchestrated. These demonstrations, as we know, are led by international communist organizations. So that's how a lot of this ties together. Take a half an hour to really describe how it all integrates and how it's all organized and orchestrated and centralized from a source to get us to react into a situation that will not bode well for the American people. On a final note, I'd just like to say that regarding this movie, The Interview, I had a chance to watch it. I wish I had not. I do believe that it is socially debilitating. It is a movie that I do not recommend that a woman or child see, period. And a man either, as far as that goes. That's my personal opinion. It is not well done, but worst of all, it is very vile. If it doesn't have an R rating, I'd be very surprised. I happened to watch part of it simply because I wanted to find out what the furor was with North Korea and all the rest of it. My personal opinion now is that a lot of that furor probably was done to get people like you and me to watch it, and the debilitating effect it would have on our morals and character thereby doing so. Until next week, we'll see you then.